Oh,
Hi friends, welcome back to this week's class of Dead Funny University. I am your host and fellow student Kelsey, and teaching us on Elder Scrolls Morrowind this week is our good friend Cody, who knows many things about this and has been adding details to his notes to tell me even while we were setting up this episode. Cody, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, aside from that thing that I think I almost forgot.
All right. I don't think we need. Do you have an opening quiz, or are we going to skip that for this particular week? Up to you.
Oh no, I have quizzes, Kelsey.
Oh heck yes, let's quiz.
Yeah,
Let's
you're
do
you're
this.
not you're not getting off this one easy. All right, so here we go. Starting off, this is Oblivion and Morrowind. I think
Okay.
I probably favored Morrowind more now that I'm reading my questions, so whatever. Anyways, who are the Ashlanders? A. People from Oblivion. B. People from Morrowind. C. Wood elves. D. People who just love Ash Ketchum.
Oh God, I want the answer to be D, but I'm gonna go with people from Morrowind.
All right. Where do the Dunmar live? Your backyard. Morrowind. Mirkwood. Dol Guldur.
Ah, Mirkwood.
Who voice acted Uriel Septim? Patrick Stewart, Sean Bean, John Cena, or Frank Oz?
I'm gonna go with Frank Oz.
All right. What console was Morrowind on? Xbox, Xbox 360, which is a tongue twister. Oh my gosh. PlayStation or Game Boy?
Tongue Swiffer. I'm
I'm trying hard, Kelsey.
gonna go with the original Xbox.
Okay. And what made Oblivion better than Morrowind? This isn't multiple choice, and there are a lot of right answers. I just want you to give it, stab in the dark. What do you think made Oblivion better than Morrowind?
And Oblivion came first, correct?
I'm not telling you that.
Ooh, balls. Okay. Well, I'm gonna guess that it came second because I think I actually remember it being released, and I don't remember Morrowind being released. And so I'm gonna say graphics update, possibly a better soundtrack, possibly a better campaign story, possibly better creation. I don't think this was the thing where you could customize your own genitals, so I'm just gonna go with better character creation and not make it weird. And I'll go with all of those reasons.
Okay, so I want you to write down what you answered, because
Okay.
some of those are right and some of those aren't, and it's actually kind of interesting. Like, you brought up something that I think is fascinating that we'll talk about.
Okay.
But
Hopefully
anyways,
not customize your own genitals. Keep talking.
you cannot customize your own genitals in any of these games, but we are going to talk about character customization. So we're going to start with Morrowind, just like a little bit of detail about it, and then later on I'll talk about the stories, but this is just kind of details about the game.
Okay.
It was released on May 1st, 2002, and was eventually also released on the Xbox. I think within the first few years, it sold 300,000 PC copies and eventually sold nearly 1 million. So prior to Morrowind, Daggerfall and Arena were really, for the time, they were excellent games, and they were kind of important games, and games that a lot of fans really cared a lot about, but they were kind of cult hits. You know what I mean? Like, not everyone heard of them, and they didn't have a lot of critical acclaim. Morrowind was where Bethesda started winning awards. So it was like Game of the Year. It was critically loved. It was a very big, important game. And so some things remained the same. It was still very free roam RPG. You build a character. All that basic stuff was still there. But Morrowind, in my opinion, is the first playable game. And what I mean by that is, I think if I gave you Morrowind, you could play it.
And enjoy it.
And enjoy it.
Okay.
It's weird. It would feel old, but it wouldn't be like, I don't know. You move with WASD and spacebar is jump. You know what I mean? It has that minimum amount of stuff going for it, and it does guide you a little bit more. Now, so you know how I said some people, there's contention among the community about which game is the best? Some people say Daggerfall is the best. a lot of people think Morrowind is the best Elder Scrolls game.
Okay.
So it had a crazy amount of choice in how you build your characters and abilities and equipment. Like the amount of customization you could do with like your right pauldron versus your left pauldron versus bracers. There were tons of different weapons. Like Morrowind has more types of weapons than Oblivion or Skyrim. And just more weapons in general. There's like more different types that you can get and play with. There's way more spells with like much wider diversity of uses. And at the time, all of this was new and amazing. Like you could cast flying spells on yourself, you could turn yourself invisible. The magic system was really complicated and really huge and really neat. Like at the time, it was amazing. Now, some of the stuff that I think is maybe still a little rough is combat is still weird. So like, you'd probably be used to in a game if you click the swing my sword button, you swing your sword and it hits the enemy.
Uh-huh.
Morrowind was still a dice roll. So you'd swing your sword and you'd miss and you'd miss and you'd miss and then you'd hit. And it was based on your skill level, which means at the start of the game, you're sitting there with like a toothpick, just miss, 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 miss over and over and over again. And it's real difficult early on to kind of get into the game because of that. The other thing that I think sets Morrowind apart from a lot of the other games is the place Morrowind, that's where it's set, looks crazy. It's very alien looking. So if you like look at some of the still art that I sent you from Morrowind,
Mm-hmm.
it looks bonkers. Like there's giant mushrooms, there's these things called silt striders that are these huge bugs.
Oh
Monsters look
yeah.
very strange. It is not like stock sword and sorcery. This is a regular fantasy world. Um so because of that, I think that's one of the reasons why people say this is one of the better games. Um, but then like once you're actually in the game, it's still similar to its predecessors in a lot of ways. Like it's still very difficult, especially early on. Your leveling and how you level matters a lot. There's different builds and like combinations of skills you can do that make a viable character, and then there's also ways that you could build a character that would just mean you eventually won't be able to play the game. Like you can just make your character poorly and then you're kind of stuck.
Now, out of curiosity, is that something that you could do on purpose? Or like could you do that on accident? Could you actively be trying and just create a character poorly?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, if
Oh,
you don't know what you're doing, yeah, it's totally feasible that you would just invest in skills that were never helpful or not level them properly. It's a kind of, you have to think about your leveling a little bit.
hmm.
It's not a very forgiving game. It's not impossible. Like that makes it sound a lot worse than it is. There's like very smart combinations and then like kind of meh combinations, and there's like dumb stuff you can do when leveling that makes no sense.
Uh-huh.
Um and it's not always immediately apparent, but it's not terrible.
Yeah.
Um but like what set this game apart from its predecessors though was that it was fully 3D. So like all objects in the world were fully 3D. Things had depth, like so it wasn't just like a flat thing with a few square buildings. It was like mountains were mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really incredible in that way. Something else that Morrowind added that is important for the game because it's allowed it to sustain is modding. So
Oh.
modding is what now makes Morrowind a game that's still viable. Like people still care about Morrowind because there's HD remakes. They are making whole new like islands in the game. There's a mod for there's like romance mods. There's mods to change any mechanic, add magic, just endless modifications. And the reason for that is Bethesda released with the game a modding toolkit that they used to make the game. It's like
Oh, neat.
here's the studio we use to make everything in the game, have fun with it. So it's actually pretty straightforward to make mods. There's a lot of great tutorials.
So
The
quick
other thing,
go
oh
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. No,
Uh,
no, go ahead.
quick question with that. So when Minecraft started allowing mods and then they actually started going, "Oh, hey, not only are mods so cool, but we're going to host specific ones that we think are really special and interesting so that way you can see them. We're going to like highlight those the ones that are really neat." Did Not Oblivion. Nope. Crap. Who makes these?
Bethesda.
Thank you. Did Bethesda specifically hold up specific mods at any point in time and go, these
You
are the
know,
really cool ones?
I don't know. I'm sure, like, well, I honestly just don't know.
Okay.
Like, the thing that drives it right now is not from Bethesda, but
Hmm.
they actively encourage it and don't stop it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's some games that intentionally make it hard to mod. Bethesda does the opposite. They're like, yes, mod our game because people will keep buying it and playing it.
Hmm.
Um, well, and actually, kind of interesting to the point where with certain mods, you can install Morrowind on an Android device. Like,
Ooh.
someone literally rebuilt all the code for it in an open source format, and all you have to do is have the data files from, like, it uses all the assets from original Morrowind and is then basically a redo of the game. And that hasn't been taken down yet, which I think speaks volumes to Bethesda's willingness to allow people to use their stuff. So the other thing I think that really sets this game apart from its predecessors, like, we'll get to story stuff in a minute, is the music. So on the earlier Elder Scrolls games, you just couldn't store enough information to have good music.
Hmm.
So, but Morrowind's soundtrack, which I'm listening to right now, like, stands up. It's really great. It's by a guy named Jeremy Soule, and it's very good music. And he would go on to do the music for all of the later games. But starting with Morrowind, it's like top tier. This is excellent video game music.
Oh,
All of
wonderful.
these games had.
Now, when we talk about excellent video game music, that can have a variety of meanings. Does that mean this has got, those driving drums to like really like
Yeah.
intense? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, you've heard like the Dovahkiin song, right?
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah, so same composer.
Okay. I
Like, it's a different theme, but that style and that, like, gravity of music, like, the music in Morrowind
mhm.
is just as good as it is in Skyrim.
Okay. So this is something that you should throw on if you're working and you need to pay
Yeah,
attention, but you need to like be awake.
yeah. I mean, it's like
Brilliant.
excellent music.
In case you can't tell, I'm asking because I'm going to listen to it while I'm working tomorrow. All right, sorry, keep telling me stuff.
No, so that's my, like, end of information on Morrowind. I'm gonna get to story later, but if you have any Morrowind questions, now's the time.
Morrowind. Okay. So what year did it win Game of the Year?
I believe when it came out, 2002, but I can check that.
2002. Okay, got it. And then is your Ashlanders question related to Morrowind or is that
It is.
okay.
So that gets into the story a little bit.
Okay. And I imagine the Who voiced Uriel Septim is as well.
Who voiced? Oh, so it was the year it released that it won Game of the Year, and from IGN. And so as far as the Ashlanders go,
Mhm.
that is the name that people from Morrowind call themselves because Morrowind is a mountainous, or is a volcanic island. So there's a volcano that has erupted and dumped ash everywhere,
Got
hence
it.
Ashlanders.
Okay. And this did release for the PC in 2002 and it was later released to the Xbox, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, got it. And then we're going to go into Oblivion in a minute. Who voiced Uriel Septim? Was that Frank Oz? Because the other names are really important.
We're gonna
Okay, okay.
that is Oblivion related.
That is okay. Then I will shut up. This was the first game that had like fully 3D everything,
Yes.
and
Yes.
all my questions about the pictures that I'm looking at, which are bonkers and super cool, by the way, um, I imagine are story related. So I will just sit back and listen at this point.
Okay, so Oblivion releases in 2006, March 20th.
Okay.
Oblivion sold 9.5 million copies, and that number is still growing. But, like,
Oh,
very quickly turned around 9.5 million copies. So, like, in the same time span that Morrowind sold 300,000, Oblivion sold 9.5 million. And this was the first time that I think a Bethesda game became like a household title. Like, I had friends that played Oblivion. I did not know anyone else that played Morrowind. But Oblivion was like everyone in my school, like my cousin who doesn't play video games played Oblivion. It was huge when it released. Um some new very interesting things about this game. The first one is it's fully voice acted. So you don't have to read in the game. Every single character has someone read their dialogue. The problem with that is they had like 10 voice actors, so there's like 5 people that voice main characters, and then there's 5 voice actors that voice everyone else in the entire game,
Well,
which
that's
is a lot.
great. That's great if you have super talented people
I
like
mean,
with
they did,
uh,
but you end up having some people that sound similar.
yeah, that I believe. And you said this
So
was the first game that had voice acting in it.
it's not the first game ever that had
Oh,
voice
yeah,
acting.
sorry.
It was the first Elder Scrolls game where it was all voice acted. So Morrowind had a little bit. It was like when you were walking through the streets, someone be like, "Hey, who are you?" or
Mhm.
"Get out of here," you know. Um, but in Oblivion, it's like if you talk to an NPC, every line they said was read out loud. Most notably with that is Uriel Septim, who was the king, was voiced by Patrick Stewart,
Oh,
and Martin Septim was voiced, which is his son. We'll get to him in a minute. Was voiced by Sean Bean. So there's 2 like big name actors they had.
wow, that's amazing.
Um, Oblivion also had like a new engine, like so a lot of the mechanics from Morrowind are very similar to Oblivion. Um Almost identical really in terms of mechanics, but the engine was cleaned up a lot and a lot of things ran a lot smoother and it was a lot easier to do a lot of things. It was just less clumsy.
Mhm.
The other thing that was new with Oblivion, and this was really cool, is like an in-depth detailed character creator. So
Ooh.
Morrowind, you were just clicking through options. So you had like different faces, different hairstyles, different hair colors. That's character creation. Oblivion, you had sliders on everything. So you could make bonkers looking people. um this was really cool too because it's actually how they generated all of their NPCs. Is like again, this is kind of like the tradition in Bethesda games of they have development tools and then they're just like, and now those development tools are the game. Um, Now, the characters in Oblivion kind of end up looking like squishy mashed potatoes, just because of the graphical limitations at the time, and this was
Mhm.
like new technology, but it's still pretty cool. As far as the visual aesthetic, I think Oblivion looks better, like it's newer, it looks better. But it's actually visually less creative, in my opinion, than Morrowind. It's very standard fantasy. I think that might have helped with sales because Morrowind was so alien looking,
Mm.
but Oblivion just looks like it could be straight out of Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? It's beautiful forests, dudes
Mhm.
with swords in knight's armor. It's very standard fantasy. Um the one thing though that Oblivion did start doing, and this has been the trend moving forward, is it simplified a lot of what was in Morrowind. So Morrowind had crazy complicated magic like enchantments, potions, crazy spells, tons of weapons, tons of armor, tons of skills. And Oblivion went, okay, that was all really hard for people to understand. So we're going to simplify this down a little bit. We're going to streamline a bit. Like, so in Morrowind, you could have like long blade, short blade, spear, and I think there was one other kind of oddball weapon type there. And in Oblivion, they're like, you can have swords. This is getting ridiculous. Um, oh, I think then two handed weapons were also a separate category. So my
So they
point is, there's a lot of stuff in Morrowind that they just went, that's going to be called swords.
so
Stop.
they shot for the moon in Morrowind, and then they had to like bring it back into reality. As they're like, if you have 84 choices for weapons,
Yeah.
you have too many choices, and you're not going to be able to actually like specialize in just one or two and get good at them.
Well, it's also the nature. It's a trend of modern game development, which is that when all of your dialogue is text, you can have one person in a room with a laptop write a million pages of dialogue that's all really in depth and crazy. When you
Mhm.
have to voice act every line, you have to start cutting corners. We can't have every NPC say something unique because we have to have a voice actor come in and say that. Then we have to
Mhm.
record it. Then we have to edit it. Then we have to put it in the game. Whereas if it's just text, it's like, well, who cares? Text is free, you know?
Mhm.
And so the same thing was true with like models and the size of models. Like if you want to have a million different types of armor and you have HD beautiful graphics, takes up a lot of space. So
Oh, solid point. When you've got all these different
yeah.
characters where there's so much more there's so much more customizable.
Well, and it's why, like,
Huh.
in reality, games are getting smaller in some ways compared to older RPGs because you think about Final Fantasy VII. You can't have a background that looks like crap. It has to look amazing. It has to look photorealistic and
Yeah.
glowing and beautiful. And that takes thousands of man hours. Where
Yeah.
if you're just like, make a brown hill, no one cares, well, that's easy. So you can make it huge because it's a lot simpler.
Okay.
Um, so the and also, I mean, it's an issue of memory too. That like as we demand better and better graphics, you can put less in games. Like obviously storage is increasing, but at some point, having a game that's 10 terabytes large because you want to have something the size of the United States that's photoreal becomes impractical, and developing it becomes impossible.
Yeah, that's a solid point. I didn't think about that, but that's absolutely
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, it's an issue of the like these older games, the reason they were so big is because they didn't have to store as much stuff, you know?
Yeah, the countryside looked the same no matter where you were in the damn thing. So,
Right.
okay, that's fair. All right.
Um the other big um the other big change here was the combat in general now feels like regular combat in Oblivion. So like you swing your sword, it hits the monster. That's it. Like there's not like your skill adds damage. It doesn't decide whether you hit. And I think that made it for a lot of people a lot more playable. So all of these changes that in some ways make the real hardcore fans go boo also are why Oblivion was way easier to market. That and it released on PC, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360, so it had a wider release.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm noticing here is it seems like Oblivion has taken a larger step away from D&D in many ways, and maybe it's a sidestep towards more what is more marketable, what is more marketplace standard, and that may be where they kind of found this sweet spot between what their original bread and butter was, which was this D&D just in video game format, and what people are actually going to purchase.
Well, and I think it's in terms of between Morrowind and Oblivion, Oblivion looks like Dungeons and Dragons and Morrowind looks weird.
Mhm.
The way the game plays, Morrowind plays like Dungeons and Dragons and
Mhm.
Oblivion plays like a modern game.
Okay.
Like Oblivion would be comfortable to play even if it's a little ugly, like cuz the graphics are now kind of dated, but you would sit down and just be like, "Oh yeah, this is a game. It makes sense. There's nothing weird."
Mhm.
Um Now we're going to talk about Skyrim next week because that one's contentious for a lot of reasons in terms of the mechanics, but from just like a modern gamer's perspective, I think Oblivion is like totally 100% playable. Whereas Morrowind, it's like, it's a little weird. It's a little strange.
Okay. That's that's I'm honestly grateful that that Oblivion took a step. I haven't played either of these games, but the D&D function of swing a sword, roll to see whether or not you hit makes
That was
for
weird.
I genuinely hate it in D&D, and I would hate it more playing it because I'm like, I am 8 feet tall. I have a 4 foot tall Dow. I'm 6 inches from this orc in my face. I'm gonna hit it with the goddamn sword. And it's like, nope, in your rage, you'll whiff over its head. Like, ah! And so I appreciate that your skills actually increase the damage. I like that
Yeah.
mechanic better.
It is better. It is more fun to play. Like when I played Morrowind recently, the first mod I installed made it so I always hit things. Like immediately, that was the first mod because otherwise it's just such a slog to get through the early because eventually your skill gets good enough in Morrowind that you hit every time basically,
Mhm.
but you have to get to that point and who wants to do that, you know?
Yeah, that you spend a lot of time dying or almost dying and wasting resources to try to save yourself to get to that point.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that the magic was simplified in Oblivion.
Yes.
When we talk about this magic, what realms do we have available? I'm going to guess off the top of my head that we've got fire magic. I'm going to guess off the top of my head we have healing, but what else what other kinds of things do we have?
So there are a bunch of different schools, and I'm gonna try to name them, and I'm gonna miss some. So you have restoration, conjuration, transmutation. I think divination, alteration, and destruction. That feels like all of them. And I believe that is at least true from Morrowind through Skyrim. The difference is in Morrowind, you could build your own custom spells, like by modifying effects and spell cost and all this other stuff. I believe that function was still in Oblivion. It's just the amount of spell effects associated with each school were diminished. So, like, in Morrowind, there were more effects built into the game that you could stack together and create custom things all by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
In Oblivion, that was reduced. So was the process of casting a spell, which this seems like maybe kind of obvious that it should be this way. But in Morrowind, you have to ready your magic and then cast it. In Oblivion, you just press a key and it casts the spell. But it kind of means in Oblivion, it was a lot easier to just be like, I am a sword mage. Whereas in Morrowind, it more encouraged you to be like, if you're a mage, you're in mage mode.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in sword mode and mage mode. It's kind of one or the other. So, and this is also a trend that continues through the games, is in Morrowind and in earlier games, it kind of was like, if you're playing as a wizard, you are a wizard. If you are playing as a fighter, you're a fighter. In Oblivion, it starts to get to the point where you can kind of be like all of these things. This also gets into how leveling works, but that's like way too fiddly to like really get into.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time you get to Skyrim, basically anyone can be like a stealth master wearing heavy armor shooting fireball. In Morrowind, that was really not possible. If you were a wizard, you were a wizard.
You were more class defined.
You were more pigeonholed into one thing that you were doing. And in
Mhm.
Oblivion, it's kind of the middle ground between those two. And in Oblivion, it's like literally if you want to become a wizard, you're a wizard now. Like, that's it. You're a wizard. Like, shoot fireballs, you're a wizard. And I mean, in Skyrim, it's like way less spells, even more so. Did I say Conjuration?
You did.
Okay, so kind of going through those, like Conjuration, you can summon pets to help you kill things. Alteration, I believe, is where you're like making yourself invisible or walk on water or fly. Divination helps you find stuff or like learn things. Transmutation can turn stuff into other stuff. Heat restoration, obviously, and
Healing.
destruction, obviously. You can shoot lightning or ice or whatever, you know. I think there might be a few others, but you know, that's the big ones.
So it sounds like there are magic schools in addition to elemental magic. Because you're
Yeah, well,
mentioning
I
like,
mean, any of your elemental magics would be destruction, like fire, lightning, frost. I think there might be like a force, but all of those are destruction. But then, yeah, there's schools of magic. Yeah.
okay.
Well, then there's also alchemy and enchanting. So you can make potions that have spell effects, or you can have items that have spell effects associated with them, and that's true through all the games.
Okay. And is this magic, is this Harry Potter magic or is this Brandon Sanderson magic where it has rules and it has very strict structure to it?
I would say there's like a mage's college. It's more like Harry Potter, I think. Like you can go to mage school and then you can cast your mage spells and they're like are defined spells, but
Mhm.
you're not like sitting there like measuring a certain amount of dust to make a fireball. It's not that complicated. You just
Okay.
know fireball and can cast fireball. It works a lot more like Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. Got
It's
it.
very obvious that's where they got this from.
Okay. So we've talked about the weapons a little bit, which are just simplified of what we've already discussed in a
Yeah.
previous episode of Dead Funny University. We've talked a little bit more about magic than I think we did previously.
Yes.
What is there anything else about Morrowind or Oblivion that you think that before we get into the plot that is important that I should know?
I don't think so. I think that's the biggest stuff. I mean,
Okay.
I think I would say Morrowind to me was like a game that I played very young and was like incredible to me. It was an amazing experience for me to play this game because it was like, oh my gosh, I'm in a fantasy world. Like I had never realized how amazing an open world game could be because I played like Zelda, right? But
Mhm.
you're on a linear story and the world's very small. This is like I could just go to another city and steal all the cups. I'm going to, you know? Like I'm taking everything now. Who cares about the main story? I'm going on my own adventure, you know.
Uh-huh. Okay, so they definitely kept that open world then. Got it.
Oh yes, yes. All of these are, and we'll actually talk about that in the story a little bit. But
Mhm.
like, I have never beaten a story in an Elder Scrolls game, and I play them a ton. I just don't care about the main story. I just do other stuff.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to imagine playing a game like this and not caring about the main plot at all. And that's really
Well,
hard for me.
in Morrowind, there are parts of the game where like you'll be playing through the main quest, and they're like, you need to go just become a hero in this land. Go do something for the Fighters Guild. Like, get out of here. Go
Mhm.
play your own game, and then come back in a while and keep doing the main story quest. Like, it wants you to go and immerse yourself in the world and not just go from like beat to beat to beat to beat in the
Yeah.
game.
Well, I'm glad they do that because they've spent all the dev time to make this open world, so they may as well force you to get out in it and socialize with the people.
I just remembered something else I want to mention. This
Hmm.
is interesting. Another big turning point for Oblivion, and reason that people kind of hate on it a little bit, it's the first time there were quest markers. In Morrowind, there was never, you could not open a map and have it tell you where to go. You would have a map and you would have verbal instructions and you'd have to work it out.
Now,
In
would you have?
Oblivion was
Go
the
ahead.
first time it would put like a chevron on the screen, like walk to here. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was interrupting you. So they added quest markers in Oblivion, which I've
Mhm.
spent a ton of time running around looking for a quest to start. So I'm a fan of quest markers.
There is a reason to have them, yes.
Yeah. What I'm wondering is with Morrowind, did they have a journal or something so you could look
Yeah.
back? Oh, thank God. If they only
You
told you
could
once,
reread
and
the directions, yeah.
I hate games that are like, we'll tell you this once, and if you're not paying attention, you are screwed.
No, you had a quest journal. It was poorly done for modern standards, but it
Hmm.
was still like a viable way to go, like, frick, what did that guy say? Flip, flip, flip. Oh, go east down the river until you hit the fork and then take a left and walk 15 miles. You know, there should be a cave there.
Okay. It sounds like, yeah, it just sounds like Oblivion brought this whole series closer to market standards.
There's a reason why it sold 9.5 million copies.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the reason everyone knows about Bethesda is Oblivion. Like, Skyrim was like obviously huge, crazy, but the reason there was a big fan following for Skyrim right away was the 9.5 million people that loved Oblivion.
Hmm. Now, did they keep the mod packs and the mod process with Oblivion?
Yes, yes. All the games since Morrowind are modded like crazy.
So are there still and Oblivion is it's open world, but it's individual open world. So my open world and your open world, we could in theory find the same stuff, but I'm not going to encounter you if we're both playing
Right?
Oblivion at
Yeah,
the same
they're
time.
not multiplayer. They're not
Okay,
MMOs. No, no.
got it.
There is an Elder Scrolls MMO that I'm just decidedly not talking about because I don't care about it. But um, all these games are single player games. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Got it. All right. Well,
Well,
wonderful.
there's a mod that lets Morrowind be multiplayer, but it is like very sketchy. Anyways, sorry. Go ahead.
Not at all. Okay, well then, if that's kind of what you want to tell me about the base games, do you want to jump into Morrowind's plot?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So Morrowind starts like a trope of all of the Elder Scrolls games since, which is you start out as a prisoner. That is just how all the games start after that. You have a weird dream, you wake up on a boat, and basically you're released from prison and sent to the island of Morrowind, and you're just given a letter that says, go and talk to this guy named like Caius Cosatus. He's a weird old drug dealer living in a hovel, or not really a drug dealer, just a drug addict. Um, and he's just like this dirty naked old man who says he's like the local leader of the Blades, which is the Emperor's secret police, and then he sends you on this quest. And the basic quest is you find out you are the Nerevarine, which is like a reincarnated chosen one that the Ashlanders believe in, who are the people of Morrowind. The people of Morrowind are mainly the Dunmar, which are the Dark Elves.
Hmm.
This is their homeland, and the Nerevarine is like a historic chosen one that reincarnates every so often to do something important. There's like different like prophecies that the reincarnated Nerevarine is going to meet. You met some of them, so the Emperor suspects you might be this person and basically hires you to get in good with Morrowind. So you're recruited for political gain, and basically what you do is you stop something called the Dagoth Ur and the sixth house. Um, Basically it's an evil magic MacGuffin that's there to kill everyone, and you just have to go and stop it. And it just so happens you do that while working for the Emperor, which makes you like a great guy, and the Emperor looks good, and you stop the end of the world from happening and save Morrowind, and you're heralded as like the hero of Morrowind, right? So
Okay.
this is the kind of like a first time you're like a special chosen one started in this game.
Follow-up
Now,
question.
yeah,
Is this Navarine, is it always male, or is it whatever your character
no,
is? Okay.
no, because you're not male necessarily. Like
Okay.
your character creation is totally open. Oh, that actually is something I did want to mention. So something interesting that I thought was cool about this game is if you remember in the last game, so we have all the same races you can play as, and the Nerevarine can be any of those, right? So I'm gonna pull up my list here. Sorry.
Oh, it's not always a dark elf?
No,
Interesting.
no, definitely not. Did I not give you all the pictures of the Morrowind races?
You did not give me all the pictures of the Morrowind races. You were holding on to those and you were making me beg. Uh
Oh, I put them all in the Oblivion races folder. I'm sorry. So
I
they're all in the same folder. You'll be able to tell which one's which.
I feel like I
Um,
can tell.
yeah, so you can play as the High Elves, the Argonians, which now actually look like real lizards, the Wood Elves, the Bretons, the Dark Elves, the Imperials, which is actually a new race now. It didn't used to be that the Imperials were their own like separate race, because they're the ones that are from like the Imperial Provenance from the earlier games.
Mhm.
The Khajiit, the Nords, and then this is a new one, the Orcs. Because if you remember in the last game, the Orcs now have like a position and a homeland and are part of the Empire, so you can actually play as Orcs now. And then you can also play as the Red Guards. So the Orcs is actually a new addition because of canonically what happened in the previous game.
Now is this plot a continuation of the previous plots?
Nope, not at all. Not
Not at all.
related.
Okay.
Like there's hints, and this kind of happens later from Morrowind. There's more tie-ins back to like other plot points or like side characters from earlier games. But really all of these things are very episodic. They don't really relate to each other in a
Mhm.
larger story. It's just like in the second game, orcs became part of the kingdom. In the third game, you can play as an orc.
Got it.
Um, but yeah, character creation's totally up to you. So you can be a man or a woman. You can be any of those different races, and all of them will be the Nerevarine and save the kingdom.
Got it. Okay.
Um. Now that's the main story. But what's cool about Morrowind, kind of starting with Morrowind, is all of the side quests are just as good or better. So
Ooh.
you can do side quests for different noble. So like the sixth house is like this evil house that worships the Dagoth Ur, this like evil monster thing, right?
Mhm.
But there's five other noble houses that you can just work for. You can become an assassin and do like there's a story for the Assassins Guild. You can do a story for the Mages Guild, the Fighters Guild, the Thieves, or just random people around. And all of these quests were like well written, manicured. They have a plot. And so for me, whenever I played the game, I would just end up doing one of those storylines because I found them more engaging because they weren't handed to me. I had to decide to go and be that person. It wasn't the game deciding for me. It was like, no, I want to go be the leader of the Fighters Guild. So you do that.
That is such a you thing though. Like you
Yeah.
don't you were like, I want to choose, and if I want to be a fighter, I'll be a fighter. You're not going to force me to be the chosen one. I think that's bullshit. Like that is such a Cody decision and I love it.
Yeah. Right. I know. So do you have any other plot questions or just questions in general about more?
So it sounds like this particular plot was really short and way less complicated than the previous ones.
No, I just didn't go into a ton of detail about it. You do a
Okay.
lot of researching of like people go missing because the Dagoth Ur is trying to take power, and you have to like find him and find his magic source of power and like gain artifacts to help you. It's like it's really long. It's just the moral of the story is you're a special chosen one. You kill a big scary monster. That's
I
the
mean,
story.
that's That is a common story. So you talked about these side quests being just as good as the original plot and that they're well
Hmm.
written. When you talk about just as good as the original plot, do you mean that you can sink 5, 10, 15 hours into these?
Oh
What
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. If not more, like
whew,
they're long. Yeah.
okay. So there's actually a ton of playability in Morrowind because it sounds like could you go and do become the head of the Fighters Guild and then go and do one of these other side plots and then go and do one of
No.
those. No.
So the factions, all
Ooh.
the different guilds are opposed to each other. If you're a fighter, you end up screwing over the mages. If you're a thief, you steal from the mages and the fighters. If you're an assassin, you can't be a fighter, a thief, or a mage. um, so this is another way that, especially Morrowind, really pigeonholes you because, like, in the course, in like the quest line of the Fighters Guild, you have to attack the Mages Guild, or vice versa or whatever.
Okay.
So you could play tons and tons and tons of hours of this game, but you'd have to make a few different characters. It would
Got
it
it.
would be you'd get kicked out of guilds for doing the missions of other guilds. And
Okay.
that's not like 100% accurate. You can cross list a little bit, but
Mhm.
it's not 100%. There's like branches where you can't do both.
Yeah, once you've gone too far down one branch, you can
Yeah,
never come back and it doesn't matter how many times you show up with a rose, they're not going to talk to you.
right.
Okay. So that's right. We are talking about Morrowind, which is a little bit more pigeonholy than the others. Now, the
Yeah.
previous games were the side plots as well fleshed out.
No, like in the case of Daggerfall, they were so poorly fleshed out that they were frequently broken.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that. That was actually going to
Yeah.
be my next follow-up question is whether or not if you still had those randomly
No.
generated quests. They
Everything in Morrowind is scripted. So the result of that is it's
Okay.
a much smaller game than
Mhm.
Daggerfall. But every single detail is planned out, so you don't really run into those dead ends or broken quests. They're all like well done, fun stories. And there's like really fun ideas, like especially Morrowind, they're not always combat based. There's one where you just like deliver love letters between this woman and like a highwayman that robbed her. Um, like you find a woman on the side of the road and she's like, "This highwayman robbed me, but I'm in love with him. He was so beautiful. Can you deliver a love letter for me?"
Oh my
And then you
god.
deliver love letters back and forth between them, and that's the quest.
God, how okay, Cody, I need to ask you a very serious question.
Huh.
How pretty would a highwayman have to be in order for you to ignore the fact that he robbed you?
If you see the graphics in Morrowind, it's not possible. He's gonna look like a gross cylinder no matter what you do.
He's gonna look like a potato. Okay.
Yeah, like he's gonna be three-dimensional, which matters, but he's not that three-dimensional.
All right, so not possible. Good, good. I'm glad that I will not have to be delivering love letters for you, too, highwaymen. All right. That's all that's all that's coming to the top of my head right now
Okay.
about the Morrowind plot. Is there any other detail that you're like, if you don't know this, you're screwed?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think you're good.
All right, then do you want to walk me through Oblivion?
Sure. So, Oblivion. You're in prison. The king escapes through your cell through a secret passageway because he's going to be assassinated. And then decides that since you're the only person around and he's about to be assassinated, he trusts you with a special mission, which is to find his heir and put him on the throne, right?
Okay.
There is stuff at work against this. There is a cult called the Mythic Dawn that are trying to assassinate the emperor and keep a new emperor from sitting on the throne. The reason for this is if there's no emperor on the throne, Cyrodiil, the imperial providence, like the capital of Tamriel, the place where all this is set,
Mhm.
can be attacked by the Daedra. Now, the Daedra do become a recurring thing later in games, and the Daedra are like kind of demons slash demigods. Like 80% of the time, they are evil to like ambiguous, and then there's like two that are actively good. But generally, they're like bad. Like they remind me kind of like Norse gods in a way, where like they'll just mess with mortals because they can.
Mhm.
Um, Particularly in this case, the Mythic Dawn worships the Daedric Prince of Destruction. So when they assassinate the Emperor and there's no Emperor sitting on the throne anymore, the Daedric Prince of Destruction can open up portals to Oblivion all over Tamriel and start attacking people.
Ooh.
So your job is to one, close those portals and stop and like save settlements that are being attacked, and two, find the emperor's son, give him a special medallion, and sit him on the throne. So that's kind of your job in this game. So you're like not as much of a chosen one, um, but you are like helping to put the chosen one on the throne. And again, you're doing this with the Blades, who are the secret police of the Emperor. So this is like going to become a recurring thing, is you working with the Blades. It's
Mhm.
basically the rest of the game. You're always working with the Blades.
So you're always working for the established aristocracy
Um,
post Morrowind.
you can choose not to do the main quest, and especially in Skyrim, it kind of becomes the plot. But even in Morrowind, there is tension between Morrowind and the Empire. And in Skyrim, there is tension between Skyrim and the Empire. Like,
Okay.
the Empire has conquered all these lands, and all these lands are all mad about it. And you're kind of always there just being like, let's not start a war.
I mean, yeah, okay. So it sounds like for both Morrowind and Oblivion, they're not spending a lot of time being morally challenging. They're just like Emperor's more or less the good guy. You're doing more or less the right thing by doing X.
I would say if you look for it, they can be morally challenging games.
Okay.
Like following the main storyline is your quest. You can ignore it. Um, in the case of Oblivion, it is more cut and dry that like Satan is attacking innocent people.
Yeah.
In Skyrim, it is a moral dilemma. Like there's a civil war, you're alive during it. What do you want to do? In Morrowind, it's also a little bit more hazy. Um, this is a limitation of games, but like you couldn't have like the whole landscape of the world change because of a player's choice just because of like technical limitations.
Yeah.
But in Morrowind, there are like dark elves that don't want Imperials around because they're like conquered people and they're like screw the Empire. And they also don't like outsiders. So it's like, well, that moral ambiguity is there, especially I think in Morrowind and Skyrim. I think less so in Oblivion
Mhm.
because there is just kind of like, this is Satan. He looks like Darth Maul. He's summoning demons. Stop that guy.
He's called a Prince of Destruction, which you normally don't call people you're fond of.
Yeah, right. He's not your best friend.
Okay, so I've got two quick questions. One of them actually is about Morrowind because I forgot this
Sure.
earlier. I
No, you're
apologize.
good. What's up?
So, if I remember from when I played D&D, dark elves were generally not nice people. Like if you found a nice dark elf, he was rebelling against the dark elves in general who were, as you mentioned, evil to morally ambiguous. In Morrowind, since you're in their land interacting with them, are they all angry, evil people, or are they just against outsiders?
I wouldn't even say they're against outsiders. I would say they're mistrustful and like disdainful of outsiders.
Okay,
So like being an Ashlander is like we're from Morrowind, we're Ashlanders, and it's like a point of pride.
got it.
And they're like, this is our place, and they're like not hostile towards you generally,
Mhm,
but they also are not necessarily friendly. um in the text of the game, like, like orcs are sometimes a fantasy race that are like thought of to be evil. In the
mhm.
case of any of the Elder Scrolls games, orcs are just people. So there's like orcs running shops, or like merchant orcs. You get stat bonuses that make you like better at fighting with heavy weapons if you're an orc, and if you're a dark elf, you're like better at using a bow and arrow and a longsword. But
Okay.
that's really it. Or like I think you get like fire resistance if you're a dark elf because you're from a volcanic island. You know.
Okay, so they're not taking an opportunity to be like, now we're gonna go live with the evil people. Now we're gonna go live with the
No.
nice people.
No,
Okay.
there are like racial lines and
Mhm.
like cultures that are different. Like dark elves have different values, maybe, or like different culture, and
Yeah.
they have like areas that they feel are theirs, or that like other people are now living in. And you can see like, especially in Morrowind, you can see like structural differences between a like dark elf city and a imperial city. They don't look the same,
Mhm.
but the dark elves aren't like, and now we're going to kill anyone that isn't a dark elf. They're like, no, I mean, like anyone can have a shop here, but this is like an Ashlander city, you know.
Okay.
um so I think it handles races with more nuance than just like these are the evil ones and these are the good ones, like especially
Good.
because the high elves are not good. Like they're kind of the, if there was a bad race, it would be the high elves, who, who are like the fair skinned, blonde haired, blue eyed elves. They kind of suck, like almost universally. But beyond that,
That's amazing. Good. I appreciate that because anytime in many games, I think we take the racial tensions that we have in our modern world and we kind of we automatically put them onto games and we
yeah.
take whatever is most human and make that the good race, and anything that looks different from that becomes the evil one. And I think that's both narrow-minded and doesn't allow for greater nuance that should be available. If there were lizard people and there were cat people and there like we and there were really super tall people and really super short people as a more common part of our everyday experience, what we defined as our little group would change drastically.
Yeah, well, and it's like racism is definitely in the games.
Yeah.
Like there are like, especially in Skyrim, it gets played up a lot more, and we'll get into that. But it's like Khajiits are frequently like kind of ostracized, and you know, like there's, well, and I don't want to talk too much about Skyrim, but there's like actually kind of an interesting thing with dark elves in Skyrim, but um it like definitely does not ignore like the possibility for racism, and it does not portray it as like a good thing. It's like you meet people that are bigoted and narrow-minded. It's
Hmm.
just not like a one-to-one copy of what like bigotry is in our world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't ignore it exists. It's just like this is a fantasy world. These races are not clumsy stand-ins for other races. So it like isn't going to be a one-to-one comparison,
Okay.
but it still is a theme within the games, like not a small theme.
Got it. Okay. Why is the Mythic Dawn worshiping the Prince of Destruction? Why?
They're a crazy cult. The Daedra are gods and have followers. So any of the Daedra, like there's a bunch of them that are all like kind of demigods. You know, there's a pantheon of Daedric gods. Those
Okay.
are consistent through the games too. Like particularly between Oblivion and Skyrim, there are the same Daedric gods in both of those games.
Okay.
Um, and like I said, some of them are good, some of them are bad, and some people just worship crazy evil people. It's just a cult.
Okay, that seems a little simple to me.
I mean,
But
yeah, but if you like imagine any game where there's like an evil person and that evil person has followers, it's like, well, why does anyone ever follow someone that's evil? Like usually
yeah.
for power or for gain or you know whatever. They
And
believe
when
it's going to advance them.
you're on the outside of a cult, it's easy to be like, those people are crazy. When
Yeah,
you're on
like
the
why are you
inside of a
worshiping
cult,
the cult? Yeah,
it's a lot harder to identify the flaws in your own logic because
right.
everything in your world supports that
Well, and you
framework.
got to think too. You know, in the text of the game, the emperor is a took over everything, so that doesn't make you friends. You know, and if someone feels like downtrodden, they'll look to someone to help, and it's not going to be the emperor, you know?
That's true. I guess these games are bouncing around between conquered peoples that are
Yeah,
currently living under a conqueror.
yeah.
That's that is going to create an interesting flavor, period. That's
Yeah, well,
interesting.
I mean, it's interesting in Skyrim. Like that's what the game's about.
Oh man. Actually, this is we you just hinted enough and told me just enough about Skyrim that I'm like, actually, I really want to play Skyrim, and it is sitting downstairs, but I'm like, I can't until Cody teaches me about it.
Uh get ready to hear the phrase Skyrim is for the Nords, you know.
I've heard dumber things. All right. Is there anything else about Oblivion or Morrowind plot that you think I need to know?
The only thing else that I would say about Oblivion is it has the same side questing style as
Oh,
Morrowind.
yeah.
Huge side quests for tons of different things, very long, detailed storylines for all these different guilds. That's still present in Oblivion.
Got it. I'm sorry. I should have asked about all of that. So
No,
they
that's
also simplified the they simplified the magic, they simplified the weapons again for Oblivion.
yes.
And they kept that side questing style. They kept the modding
Well,
you mentioned
the
previously.
modding is still there. I would say the side quests and really the story in general are smaller in Oblivion because again, every line has to be read by a voice actor.
Okay.
So, if Sean Bean is the like Uriel Septim's son,
Mhm.
uh anything that he says, they had to pay Sean Bean to say line by line. So it like had a price tag on Sean Bean hours for
That's
how much
fair.
story they have in their game.
Now, I apologize. I am not enough of a Sean Bean fan to know when he like rose to prominence and then started charging big bucks for like reading lines. But is
Now
2006 pre Sean Bean prime time or are we in Sean Bean prime time?
we're in Sean Bean primetime. This was like right after Lord of the Rings.
Oh shit. Okay. Oh shit. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
it was like he was a big deal. I mean, he was a James Bond villain before that. I mean, he's never been a nobody.
That's true. He never has been a nobody. I mean, I want a career like that. That's awesome.
I mean, he just always dies. He doesn't die in this game. His dad does. Patrick Stewart dies in this, but Sean Bean lives for once.
Well, that's because he had no actual physical screen time. If he had screen time,
Which,
then he
if you ever
dies.
want to giggle, look up Martin Septim and like see what Sean Bean looks like in the game because he looks like a little weeb, and
Oh
it's pretty funny.
god. He's a mountain of a man, so that's impressive.
I should have sent you the picture and I just forgot.
Oh man. Okay, and Morrowind came out for no, sorry, not Morrowind. Oblivion came out for PlayStation, PC, and Xbox just like Morrowind did, correct?
No. So Morrowind came out for Xbox. Oblivion came out for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3.
Oh, so not PC.
No, they
Oh,
all came out for PC. Sorry,
okay, got it. Yeah.
they're originally PC. Yeah.
Okay, Xbox 360. The first Xbox I ever played was an Xbox 360, so I think in my head like Xbox 360 equals
Yeah,
Xbox,
you
and then
you you'd have to get out the old one to play Morrowind. Yeah, on a console.
I do that occasionally when I speak to Xbox fans and I misspeak and it sends everybody through the roof and they're like, "No, let us explain to you in small words. This is not the right thing." And I'm like, "All
I
right."
think it's pretty common for like any Xbox to be called the Xbox.
You
It
know
just
what?
depends on what year it is. If you're right, no one calls it the Xbox One all the way through every time.
My husband might, but you know him and you know that kind of fits with his personality.
It sure does.
Okay, then we've talked about the side quests. Magic was also simplified, correct? Magic armor
Yeah,
and weapons all
I would say streamlined. Yes, is the
streamlined.
nice way to put it. It was made to work more smoothly.
Okay. You've played some, if not all of Oblivion, correct?
I've played a lot of Oblivion. Yeah.
Okay. Compared to Morrowind, which is your preference?
Oh, that's tough. I have a more nostalgic love for Morrowind, but I think it is probably more fun to play Oblivion.
Okay.
Like, it's just there's a lot of quality of life improvements, and it's a lot better looking, and it's a lot less clumsy. But I love Morrowind for what it was, and for the nostalgia of like going around through really off-colored looking mountains stabbing rats. That's just always gonna be like a warm memory for me.
Well, knowing you the way I think I do, my guess is you would have preferred a flip of Oblivion and Morrowind as far as graphics. You would have preferred
Yeah.
Morrowind's world with Oblivion's graphics.
And given the mods that exist, that's totally feasible. Like you
Oh,
can install a lot of really mods for Morrowind to improve.
but you don't have to install those mods to play either of these games, correct?
No, no, no. I mean, you don't have to install any mods, but they're
Mhm.
just make the game a lot better.
Well, some games are essentially unplayable without mods, so I just wanted to
Yeah, no,
check.
no. Like there's like the older games, like Daggerfall and Arena. There's like some modding is maybe not the right word, but like fixes you have to put in to get it to run on a modern computer, or otherwise it
Yeah.
just wouldn't work. But no, like you could install Morrowind on your computer today and play it, like just default
Okay.
from Steam.
Okay. Well, then that's all the questions that I know that I have. If there's nothing else that you think I need to know, do you have a final quiz for me?
I do. All right,
Hey,
so we're starting from the top. Who are the Ashlanders?
those are the dark elves that live in Morrowind.
Yes, the people of Morrowind. Where did the Dunmar live?
Oh, shit. Where do the Dunmar live?
Do you know who the Dunmar are?
I'm looking through my notes trying to figure out if I wrote
I
down.
might not have explicitly said this.
I. Hang on. I'm gonna go back to my notes from last time and see if it's there. It isn't there.
The Dunmer are the Dark Elves. That's what they call themselves.
Oh! Okay, so yeah, D&D. So they live in Morrowind.
Yes.
Okay, god, flippin'
Yeah. So
shibbity
the like wood elves in this game are call themselves Bosmer, and the high elves would call themselves Altmer. That's like in their own language what they would call themselves.
Okay.
All right. Who voiced Uriel Septim?
Uriel Septim was voiced by Patrick Stewart.
Yes. What console was Morrowind on?
Morrowind was on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, or PlayStation and Xbox 360. And PC.
Okay.
No,
Do I tell you if you're
damn
wrong?
damn it. No, hang on. I have this here. Sorry, I have Morrowind, and then I have I fucked up. Morrowind was only released on PC. Fuck
And
it.
what other console whose name you get wrong?
Xbox.
Yeah, there you go.
Yay. That
The
was
one you haven't
embarrassing.
used. We did just talk about it, but that's okay.
I know, but I got confused. Sorry.
So this is an open-ended one. What made Oblivion better than Morrowind?
Haha. So, graphic improvements.
Yep.
Morrowind had really great music. Oblivion had different music. There was a
They
lot
both
of
had very good music, yes.
there was a lot of streamlining of what you could be as far as your customization and
Yep.
like what different like weapons, armor, magic, etc. And you did have more customization options. It wasn't just to pick a hairstyle and then pick a color of that hair. It was a little bit more. And Oblivion did still have those long, detailed storylines in addition to the main plot that made Morrowind so very popular.
Yep. Okay, so now here's second part, new questions. What makes these games still viable today?
The mods.
Yep. Who were the Daedra?
The Daedra it's a pantheon of gods.
Yes. What race did Morrowind add?
Orcs.
There's actually two answers to this. That's the one I was looking for, though. You got it, orcs. What is one major improvement made by Morrowind over Daggerfall?
3D graphics? Fully
Yep.
3D graphics?
Who is the Nerevarine?
That is the chosen one of the Ashlanders / Dark Elves, and that is your character in Morrowind.
That is correct. I think, like, technically you got two wrong, but, whatever.
You know what? I would like to point out that I very rarely get them wrong, but I only get them wrong when it's you.
I think that speaks more to my quality as, like, someone explaining this stuff than it does to you as, like, a person listening to me.
I think you want to push me to actually know my shit and have it written down well and know good shit. And if I don't, that's fine. I think you have higher expectations of me than others do.
That's a positive way to put a spin on me explaining things bad.
No. I think I'm going to blame me. I'm not blaming you. You do a great job. Cody, thank you so much for your time. I love these. And we should be recording a Skyrim
Yes.
episode
Yes,
soon.
I'm very excited for that.
Me too, that we will be getting out to the rest of you guys. This was our second episode of our Elder Scrolls. Feel free to go and check out our first one if you want to hear us talk about Arena and Daggerfell. Fall?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I believe it is. I actually don't know if it's Daggerfall or Fell. I'm not gonna say. I don't remember because I never played that game.
If you know, put it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this content at all, please let us know. Liking, subscribing, and going into the comments and telling us. Really, I read those comments. I love those comments. I love knowing what you guys think and what you guys want us to do, any show ideas that you have. If you think that I'm a terrible student, tell me. If you think that Cody is an amazing teacher, tell me so we can make sure that Cody's on as much content as we can get him on. But we will see you in our next class of Dead Funny University. Bye, friends.
Bye.